Welcome to the eShopperReviews podcast, episode 11. This is the podcast for February 2022. I'm Jenn-submitted.
And I'm Jake McNeil.
For those new to this podcast, eShopperReviews is a subreddit on reddit.com where Jake reviews games on the Nintendo Switch platform, and you can find the subreddit at the URL reddit.com/r/eShopperReviews. We currently have over 1,700 reviews and counting, and we are supported by your donations on our Patreon, which you can find at patreon.com/eShopperReviews. This month's sponsors are Andy Miller, Johannes, Reddit user Rambo Fox, Xlean, Stove, Ilya Zarev, Eli Goodman, Connor Armstrong, and KH. Thank you all for helping to keep the reviews coming. Now, onto the discussion topics for today. Our patron-voted game is Game Builder Garage or Neo Geo Pocket Color Selection Volume 2.
Yeah.
We have a tie?
As of this recording, we have a tie between these two, which means I get to be the tiebreaker, and I'm not quite ready just yet to say which one of these I will be doing. It kind of comes down to there's something sort of special that I want to prepare, but it depends how long it will take me to prepare it. So I will leave that up in the air and you will find out shortly. But whichever one I choose will be reviewed in the month of February.
I say go for the Pocket Color Selection.
Oh, I'm curious. Yeah. Why that one? Why do you say that one?
I don't know. I've heard about Game Builder Garage. I'm not a huge fan of it just because it's me.
Okay, now I'm curious. What have you heard that makes you not a huge fan of Game Builder Garage?
If I'm to understand it correctly, there's a bit of coding involved in it.
Well, it's a game about making your own video games.
Exactly, and I'm terrible at it.
It's not really about writing code. It's about visually piecing things together to... I won't get into it here, but, I mean... Yeah, it's about building your own video game. So basically, you would recommend the one that is in a genre that interests you more or doesn't interest you less than.
Yeah, pretty well. Yeah.
Do you know what the Neo Geo Pocket Color Selection is?
It sounds like a coloring book, maybe.
Oh, Jen! Oh, you poor simple Jen.
What is it?
Neo Geo Pocket Color Selection is a compilation of ports from a handheld video game system that came out, I want to say maybe a decade or two back, the Neo Geo Pocket Color. This is made by the same company that makes the Neo Geo game system, and basically they took a lot of their properties and turned them into handheld games. They're the company that makes games like Metal Slug, SNK's, fighting games. It's SNK. So the King of Fighters series, a lot of their better games are kind of like SNK versus Capcom style games, where it's like they have fighting games like that. There's a card fighting game. And supposedly they're very good, but it was also released to a game system that not a heck of a lot of people had, so not exactly a big seller. I mean, you're talking about a competitor to Nintendo's own Game Boy and DS lines of handhelds, and pretty much no one was able to stand up against Nintendo in those markets.
Okay.
So
I know what you're going to choose then.
Those are the two potential options here, and I have not yet entirely decided which I'll be going for.
Okay. But next month's vote is going to be interesting. All the games are new and they're all exclusive.
I decided to try something different with that month. I figured, you know what, it seemed like there was some interest in the prior month to go with the big new release, and there are so many big new releases in the month of March that I was like, you know what, I know I'm almost certainly going to want to play all of these by the end of the year. Let's get a jump start on one of them. So I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Please go ahead.
Well, the games we have are Triangle Strategy, Chocobo GP, Rune Factory 5, and Kirby and the Forgotten Land, which I am very curious about.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to, well, I'm honestly looking forward to all of these. I'll say with a bit of a caveat, I'm not so sure about Chocobo GP, but it could be
I
fun.
am I am kind of low key excited about it.
Really?
Just a little bit, yeah.
Okay. It's just been too long since we've had a really good Mario Kart style game, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see how this game will differ from Mario Kart. I'm wondering if it's just going to be a copy pasta with different aesthetics,
Mhm.
or if the mechanics are going to be markedly different. We'll see.
Well, I mean, it's being made by a different developer, so I
Right.
doubt it's going to be a copy paste. It's certainly clearly going to be in the same kind of genre. It's going to have a similar feel to it, or at least that's what it's aiming for. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
But
I don't know.
we'll see. Um, and just because people will probably be asking about it, last month's patron voted game was Pokemon Legends Arceus.
Which is
But
being
since,
released right at the end of the month. I still have not gotten my
yep,
hands on it, and hopefully I will get my review copy on time. Well, I say my review copy. I ordered it off Amazon. Hopefully I will get my copy of the game on time so that I can get a review up soon. But I imagine even if it does arrive swiftly, the earliest I would possibly be able to post a review would be like the last day of the month. And so I'm going to try and get this done as quickly as I can, but I am bound to the laws of time and I can only do what I can do. So know that if you voted for Pokemon Legends Arceus to get reviewed this month, I'm trying, man. I'm trying to get it done as quickly as I can, but I'm I mean, even saying that, I'm saying that in advance. I don't currently have it as of this recording, so I don't know how that's going to go. We'll see.
how do you think this game will be? Like, how do you think this game will perform overall?
So, already there are some people posting early impressions because the game leaked, and also because you have some people in the actual professional press who have gotten a hold of it because they've gotten advanced review copies. So, we already have some rumblings about it. And the
Mm-hmm.
early rumblings about this game are actually pretty good. Pretty much everyone has agreed, it sounds like pretty much everyone has agreed that the graphics are okay, not great, but that the gameplay, it seems like a lot of people are saying that this is the evolution they've been looking for from the Pokemon series for like decades now.
I really, really hope so because for me, while I love the Pokemon series, the formula itself is getting a bit stale,
Oh
like
yeah. I
very stale.
Well, I'm kind of jumping ahead a bit, but some of the games that I reviewed this month in preparation for Pokemon Legends Arceus, I reviewed both Pokemon Sword and Shield and Pokemon, what is it, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. And my assessment of both of those is that okay, for Pokemon Sword and Shield, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Okay, just to sum up the series before I get into specifics later on, then. Yeah, this is a series that has been dragging its feet as far as progress goes. And it's particularly noteworthy with these games because now we're on a console. We're on a console instead of a handheld. And the mainline Pokemon games, it seems like they are innovating even more slowly than they did previously, which is, I mean, you're talking about Pokemon is the number one money making franchise in the world. This is bigger than Mickey Mouse. This is bigger than Marvel. This is bigger than Hello Kitty, which doesn't seem like it would be a huge money making franchise, but it's up there. It's
But it
within the top
is.
10 or so.
It
So
is.
Pokemon is bigger than all of those. And yet the games come off feeling so backwards and cheap, which
It's just the formula. It's
Yeah.
getting a bit stale.
So hopefully, I have not gotten a hold of it yet as of this recording, but hopefully the early rumblings that I'm hearing about Pokemon Legends Arceus, that it's actually progressing the franchise. Maybe not graphically, but in terms of gameplay, I hope that is true. The other thing about Arceus that I have heard, and I've heard that people who've gotten their hands on it earlier saying that this is pretty much the case, is that it is kind of like Monster Hunter World and Rise in that it is not an open world. You have very open ended individual areas that you can go to, but it is not interconnected between all of its areas. So it's like you'll go to this big open area and then you'll go back to the town, then you'll go to another big open area and go back to the town. Again,
Yeah.
I'm commenting on what is technically rumor here, but it seems to be what everyone is saying about this one. So I don't know. We'll
All
see.
right.
I have still not yet gotten my hands on it. I'm looking forward to it.
All right. So instead of doing news this time, which I feel like is a bit redundant, and I think Jake agrees.
Well, not redundant so much as it's not really our forte and it's not very fun doing it. And I'm not sure how interested our listeners are in hearing about it from us, especially what is it, usually a couple weeks or a month after the fact, now that it's old,
Mm-hmm.
old news. I figured we'd try something different this time and give people a feel for something different and see how people like it. So we are going to be kind of trying to aim for just more general topical discussion sort of thing. So I don't know, Jen, what do you want to talk about right now?
Well, tell me how your Game Awards went down. Like, did people agree, disagree with the things you chose for because you do like a end of the year wrap up thing.
Yes. Well,
And
this
you
this the one thing that surprised me the most about this, I don't think a single person complained about my lack of respect for Metroid Dread. I don't know if it's because they shared my
wow.
opinion or if they saw my explanation for it and felt like it was justified, but it's like I chose not to name Metroid Dread as Best Metroidvania. I chose Axiom Verge 2 instead. And I chose not to name it in the short list for best games of the year. Again, to be clear here, I very much like Metroid Dread. I think it is a very good game, but it is a very good game that has issues. And
In comparison to all the other games that came out last year, I'm not surprised about where it stands.
and here I was expecting, because this has been such a big deal in the Nintendo community, that not only did we finally get a new Metroid game after years and years and years, but that it's a 2D game, and it's this big question of, are 2D games still given the same modicum of respect as 3D games in the modern age? And so there are a lot of people who are really pulling for Metroid Dread, and while I respect its significance, I think that as a game, honestly, I like Axiom Verge 2 better. So I didn't get anyone complaining about that. In fact, the one thing that I think I saw the most complaints about that I can think of, I'm trying to think if I saw any other complaints. I didn't really see many people complaining about my choices this year.
No,
Like,
I looked it over and largely a lot of people agreed with what you said.
well, the one that I can recall is there was at least one or two people who were feeling like the best graphic adventure visual novel game that I should have maybe given that excuse me, that I should have maybe given that to Disco Elysium, which I very much enjoyed. I think it is a magnificent game, but I think the Nintendo Switch version has issues. The interface is all kinds of messed up. The game is not super stable. I know a lot of people have said that they had issues with the game crashing, and while I don't think I had my game outright crash on me, I had other issues where like elements of the uh, the visual interface would remain on screen after they were supposed to have been dismissed. I had issues with just trying to select the object that you want to interact with. And as much as I love the story in that game and I love the voice acting in that game, I mean, that game got multiple awards from me for the things that it did well, and it does many things well. I feel like overall, the great Ace Attorney Chronicles does everything very well, and it's more polished, it's better put together, it works better as a Nintendo Switch game. I feel like if you want to play Disco Elysium, probably the best platform to play it on is still the PC, and I highly
Hey.
recommend it. It's so good. It's so good. The story is amazing. The voice acting is incredible. If you like story, play this game. But if you have a choice, play it on PC. But yeah,
Okay,
but yeah, I think those
that's
were
that's fine.
those were probably the big, I guess, controversies. Um,
Which honestly don't really seem that big.
Now, I remember when we were recording the podcast, Jen, you agreed with some of the things that I had chosen, and you disagreed with one thing in particular, which kind of surprised me. You said that you didn't think that Monster Hunter Rise should have gotten my award for best visuals or best graphics.
Yeah, mainly because I could have sworn that there would have been other games that came out this past year that would have rivaled it. Maybe not like graphically, like, oh my God, this game looks the most realistic, but stylistically, it would look better.
Well, that's why
Um,
I have a different award for stylistically impressive graphics. That was
okay,
the
I
one.
didn't notice that.
That was the one. The Great Ace Attorney Chronicles won that as well because of its like cell shaded style, perfectly imitating the visuals of the old 2D kind of anime style games, and it's really great
Mm-hmm.
animation. And there were some other games in there, kind of more obscure stuff like Sumire, which looks like a really beautifully painted painting. There were a few, some others, of course. But I'm talking about just in terms of how impressive on a technical level the graphics are. Can you think of anything that came even close to
No,
Monter?
I
I did
can't.
this so many times in the recordings before. Monster Hunter. I keep skipping over the S for some reason. Monster Hunter Rise. I mean, I know that we were both
Oh
impressed
God.
by the graphics in New Pokemon Snap. Yeah?
We were, yeah, but if we're going for what looks the most realistic, what looks like it's pushing the envelope in terms of system specifications for the Nintendo Switch, yes, I would say Monster Hunter. Monster Hunter.
No, 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 Monster Hunter. Come on, get it right. Monster Hunter.
Rise definitely would have won that, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah. Okay,
Well,
moving on.
no, don't move on yet. We're trying to have a
No,
discussion here. Was there, come on. Were there any other awards that surprised you or that particularly interested you? Anything that you were pulling for?
I'm happy that Monster Hunter Rise got Game of the Year because it definitely deserved it. I am still on the fence about whether I want to buy it for PC right now because I know Pokemon Legends Arceus is about to come out and I really, really want to play that too. Yay, my wallet. It hurts. It hurts a
Well,
lot.
in the meantime, you can always play Monster Hunter Rise on the Switch with me.
Yes, I know, but I would rather have the keyboard and mouse.
Are you going to be getting Arceus on day one? Are we going to be trading our
I
Pokemans?
Okay, what day does it come out?
It comes out, uh, oh, what is it? The 28th, I believe. The
I
27th or
will
28th.
probably grab it on the first day
Okay.
and then just hide out in my bedroom playing
Well, then
it.
we will be able to trade our Pokemans,
What starter are you going to pick?
Do you
You
even pick
know?
starters in that game? I
I
don't know that
don't
that's the case.
know.
Um,
I I really okay. Second generation Pokemon, Totodile, Cyndaquil, Chikorita. I know Cyndaquil is
that's
part
not
of the
second
starters.
generation. No, 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 no,
Is it
no.
second generation?
Pokemon Legends Arceus is it's the same generation as Diamond and Pearl. Um, and of those starters, so when I played Pokemon Shining or Pokemon was it Brilliant Diamond and Shining
Uh-huh.
Pearl, the starter that I ended up picking because I just like him the best is Piplup. But
Okay.
I was kind of frustrated because early in that game, you do not run into many fire Pokemon. So I was kind of kicking myself, being like, I got some water Pokemon, I got some plant Pokemon or grass type Pokemon. I need more fire type Pokemon. And the starter fire Pokemon for that one is some sort of fire monkey. And I'm frustrated by the monkey Pokemon because there's so many monkey Pokemon
There are,
and
and I'm not a huge fan of monkeys
they don't
anyway.
need monkey Pokemon. They've got plenty of You know what? There's no flamingo Pokemon. There's
I
no
think there might okay. I think there might be
I
a
know that
flamingo Pokemon.
there are animals that they do not have Pokemon for. Like is there a
Dolphins.
koala Pokemon?
Yes, there is.
There is. What's the
Yes,
koala
there
Pokemon?
is. I forget, but it was in the Pokemon anime for Sun and Moon.
Okay.
He's like, oh gosh, I can't remember what it's called, but yeah, that Pokemon's constantly asleep and
Okay.
dreams about its environment, and that's how it
Wait, you're
gets
not
along in
thinking of
life.
Slackoth, are you?
No, no, that's the sloth Pokemon. No,
Yeah, that's what I
there
was
is
gonna
a
say.
koala. There is a koala Pokemon, and it looks exactly like a koala.
Okay. Y- You know what? It's something they're up to close to 900 or maybe even 1,000 Pokemon now if you count all the different variations and variants and mega evolutions and all that kind of stuff. So, I it's it, of course you're not going to be able to keep track of that many unless you are
No,
obsessive about that series.
no. And I felt so proud of myself as a kid when I was able to remember the original 151.
Hmm.
Now it's not even I don't even want to try
You know,
anymore.
and I'm sure that's a part of why they wanted to get rid of the national dex is at some point they were like, okay, how much do people really need to have 900 different Pokemon? Do people really need that many? And I understand that as an argument, but the counter to that argument is for each and every one of those 900 Pokemon, every single one of them is going to be someone's favorite. Yes, you got a
That
ton of
is
people.
true.
You got a ton of people who their favorite is Pikachu, of course. You have a ton of people who their favorite is going to be Squirtle. You know, the original 151 in particular are going to have the most fans because they've been around the longest. But
Hmm.
you're going to find there's going to be some people who their favorite is going to be Breloom, the fungus dinosaur Pokemon. Some people their favorite
Fungus
is going to
dinosaur.
be Aegislash, the sword and shield looking Pokemon. There are some people who their favorite Pokemon is going to be. Okay, I'm just naming some of my favorite Pokemon now.
Yeah, I was about to say, no, I miss the national decks, but going back to the original conversation
Oh
of
yes.
starters and legends Arceus,
Hmm.
um, I do know Cyndaquil, at least in like the trailers and stuff, appears. And the thing is, while I adore Cyndaquil from that generation of starters, my favorite was Chikorita. And I am so bummed that it doesn't look like that's going to be a choice
It doesn't.
because I love Chikorita.
Well, again, if we're talking about that generation, neither of those were starters in the generation that this is coming from. The starters were, let's see, Turtwig, Piplup, and whatever that fire monkey is.
I can't remember. But
Yeah.
either way, I. Ugh, bleh.
Bleh. Meh.
I am meh about those starters.
Okay.
Very meh about it. But anyway, shall we move on to the next topic, which I am very excited to discuss?
Okay.
Microsoft is buying Activision Blizzard.
Yeah, we've been talking so much about Activision Blizzard
I
lately.
did not see this coming at all.
You know, I didn't see it coming, but in retrospect, it makes absolute perfect sense.
Why?
Microsoft, well, just last year, they bought out ZeniMax, the company that owns Bethesda and id and multiple game companies, basically. So Microsoft now owns The Elder Scrolls, Doom, Wolfenstein, Quake, so many different game franchises. And that makes sense. Number one, so they can remain competitive with Sony, but number two, because they want content that they can make, that they can load into their Game Pass service. So clearly, Microsoft is on the lookout for any game company that is worth buying. And Activision Blizzard stock has been tanking since all the news about the
Yup.
harassment and stuff, which means that their price had to be really nice and low. And nice
Mm-hmm.
and low, I say, in relative terms, because I don't remember the dollar amount, but it was something like 10 times the amount that they paid for ZeniMax, which at the time was quite possibly the biggest game company buyout in the history of the industry. Now Microsoft has multiplied that by 10 with this buyout. But again, it makes perfect sense because Activision Blizzard has some really excellent games and some really great properties too. Even if we don't look at the games they're actively working on, like prior to this buyout, we weren't sure if we would see another Crash Bandicoot game anytime soon. We weren't sure if we would see another Tony Hawk game anytime soon. But this buyout now brings those franchises back into the question because while Activision Blizzard might have wanted to prioritize Call of Duty, Microsoft might be like, we could use another mascot platformer on our Game Pass service. Why don't you bring Crash back? Because they're not looking at it in terms of the dollar and cents of what each individual game will sell necessarily as much as they're looking at it in terms of how much will this bring to our service to make this an attractive service, well-rounded with appeal for everyone. And yeah, we got a lot of shooters on our service, and of course they're going to want Call of Duty. Of course they're going to want Call of Duty. But maybe instead of getting 3 Call of Duty games in a year, maybe they'll be like, you know what? You guys, why don't you go work on another Crash Bandicoot game for us because that's going to look more interesting than the umpteenth Call of Duty game.
Yeah,
um,
yeah, I agree.
and
I kind of see Microsoft doing that, kind of.
But the flip side of this is it gives Microsoft the opportunity to look like the good guy. Oh, hey, we're coming in here and we're going to clean up this company.
And I
They've messed
really hope
things
they
up.
do.
They've messed things up so terribly. There was no hope amongst gamers. No hope that these guys would be able to resolve their situation internally. So now we're going to come in and do that for them. And so they get to look like the good guy. It gives Activision Blizzard the chance to rehabilitate their image. The one thing that okay, there's 2 caveats here. Number one, Bobby Kotick is going to be staying on board at least until shortly after the buyout. It's been heavily implied that after the buyout, he will be departing on a magnificent golden parachute, which
Well, bye-bye.
yeah, that was always going to be the case. He was always going to get a massive payout. He wasn't going to get the boot and just get kicked onto the street. Bobby Kotick, no matter what, was going to walk out of this a gazillionaire.
Yeah,
Unfortunately. Undeservedly so, I would
unfortunately.
argue. But fine, at the very least, we can get rid of him. We're still stuck with him for another year and a half or so at least, but at that point, hopefully, we see him get the boot and good riddance. The other element to this has got a lot of people talking about monopoly because
It has.
And again, we're looking at the same situation as with Disney buying out Marvel and Fox and so many other media companies. And as a fan of like the Marvel Cinematic Universe and all of that, it's really cool to think, hey, great, now they have access to X-Men and Fantastic Four now that they bought Fox. But the other side of things is this gives them way more control over media in general, gives them way more control
Content
over,
creation. Yeah.
and that's always something that I think people should take pause with, because it's potentially dangerous for one company to own everything within a given industry. And the same is true for video games. And we'll always have like little indie companies making their little indie games, but when you get
Yes.
closer to just a few companies owning all of the major franchises, that's worrisome.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I've been
Um,
dominating the discussion here. I got to get out my opinions. Please, Jen, instead of just giving me yes and I agree, please, I want to hear what you've got to say.
um, I am hesitant about, I guess, stopping my protest of Activision Blizzard. Um, for those of you who have been keeping up, the both of us have stopped playing Activision Blizzard games. Um, I
Actively, I still review them when they come out.
Yeah, yeah. I've more or less uninstalled World of Warcraft. I've uninstalled Overwatch, which
Which is
both
a
of those
big
were,
deal.
yeah, both of those games were my bread and butter.
Yeah.
Um, and now I just play 5M. I play GTA RP, which quite honestly, I am having much more fun with. Um, but I am cautiously looking at Overwatch and going, maybe I can pick this up again. I'm not going to in the foreseeable future because I want to see what Microsoft is going to do. I want to see if Microsoft is going to clean up the harassment and sexual assault
Yeah,
things that are happening.
it definitely needs to be said. Right now, a lot of people are assuming that Microsoft will clean up Activision Blizzard and, get it back to being respectable again, but we can't know that for sure. Number one, this
Nope.
isn't going to happen for a year and a half from now. And number two, I mean, we would actually need to hear from employees inside the company at that point, hey, is it actually better?
Yep. And I'm glad Kotick is being more or less leaving, but
Eventually.
eventually, but things can change. Um, and he's not the sole harasser either.
He's the sole
Um,
enabler.
mm-hmm.
In fact, he
I,
he was actively defending people who were accused of misconduct. So I
oh,
would not minimize his role in this. He is right at the center of it as far as I'm concerned.
I hope the HR department actually becomes an HR department that's meant to protect its employees and
That's
not
never what
enable.
HR is for. HR is there to protect the company. And it does so by giving some modicum of, oh, we're looking out for you employees, as long as we can do it in a way that doesn't obligate us legally to anything. It's
Yeah, but see, having sexual assault accusations in a company, that's going to ruin the company. So I would hope that Microsoft just gets rid of those people. I would hope.
I mean, technically, as far as we know, Microsoft has a better track record with that sort of thing. But it also bears mention that's as far as we know,
Mm-hmm.
because any of these
Skeletons in the
major
closet.
any of these major game companies could have this stuff going on and we just haven't heard about it, because a lot of them are good about keeping quiet about it. And so, I mean, it's kind of depressing to say, hey, your favorite game company, you don't know. They might be doing all sorts of shady stuff behind the scenes, and you'll never know until maybe years later an employee speaks out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But let's move on to a bit more lighthearted topics, maybe.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Um, how will major studio acquisitions affect Nintendo and the Nintendo Switch?
So this was a topic I had suggested based on the whole Microsoft buying Activision Blizzard. And there have been some Activision Blizzard games on Nintendo Switch, like the Crash Bandicoot series, like Overwatch, and like Diablo, which Diablo 3 I will still maintain is an incredible, I would say must have game on Nintendo Switch. It's very good on other platforms too, but it seems ideally suited for the Nintendo Switch. And once this acquisition goes through a year and a half from now or whatever, we
Mm-hmm.
may be seeing fewer of these games coming to Nintendo Switch. But I think while these major acquisitions probably will have fewer of these games coming to Nintendo Switch, to some extent, I almost think it doesn't matter because most major third party publishers are still going to want to put their money making products on Switch. And honestly, the biggest games on Nintendo Switch are either Nintendo's own games or the indie stuff. And that's my
Mm-hmm.
opinion anyway.
I more or less agree. Um, Mainly because the PC and the other two consoles are considered more of a powerhouse than the Nintendo Switch.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see, but I'm very hesitant to see if anything other than Nintendo exclusives and smaller games go on the Switch after Microsoft is going to acquire Activision Blizzard.
Well, it's Microsoft isn't buying everyone, at least not yet. You still have
No,
plenty
not
of
yet.
other major companies that are still putting out good games on Nintendo Switch. You have Square Enix, you have Ubisoft, which again I'll mention, they are also responsible for their fair share of sexual harassment of their employees, unfortunately. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but you still have other big game companies putting out games, and I think even there, you have a bit of a divide where some of them look at one of their major new releases and do the math on whether it would be worth it to downscale that to fit on Nintendo Switch. And you have some of them making the effort and varying in the quality of the results. You have some of them barely even trying and just doing a stream version of the game, like the Kingdom Hearts games, which are set to come out in February. Those are all going to be stream versions, and there's a big question mark of the did they really need to be? Um, so I don't know. I think it's going to affect the Switch. I don't think that it's going to have a huge effect on the Switch, but it will mean that some games that would have come to Switch now will not.
Yeah, unfortunately. But I mean, we don't know. Nothing is
Mm-hmm.
set in stone completely right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I did want to talk to you about aggressive microtransactions because you suggested, or rather, I have a friend that suggested that I play Pokemon Unite. And you said to not try Pokemon Unite specifically because of the microtransactions.
Let me be
And
clear. I did not say
yeah,
not to try it. If you want to
but
try it,
to
by
be
all means,
wary.
try it. But yes, I will say be wary. Uh, and a part of the reason that I brought up this topic is because I've been snagged by one of these games myself lately. One of the games I'll be talking about later in this podcast is a game that came out on Switch this month called Turbo Shot. It's a two-stick shooter, and it is tons of fun. But oh man, the microtransactions are just so really over the top, and it really makes me hesitate to recommend the game. And it's the same deal with Pokemon Unite. Pokemon Unite, tons of fun. Good MOBA style game, kind of simplified version of that formula. But at the same time, it is just so sleazy with its microtransactions, and I.
Okay, so here's the thing. I do not generally mind microtransactions if they are just for cosmetics. Here's a new skin, here's a new skin for your weapon, here's I don't know, like some new charm or whatever to put on your weapon. I cannot believe that's even a microtransaction in the first place. Cosmetics, I don't mind. But if it is a pay to win, like unlock this character if you give us some real world money or in game currency that you bought with real world money, I hate this so much.
I don't know
That
unless
pay to win, I hate.
unless it is an overpowered character. I'm not entirely sure that qualifies as pay to win. Although there are certainly games where there are overpowered characters, like Star Wars Battlefront 2, I think. Some of the Force-using characters like Darth Vader, you had to unlock with microtransactions, and they were clearly more powerful than some of the lower-level characters. But when we're talking about Pokemon Unite and Turbo Shot, both of these games have very clear pay-to-win elements. Pokemon Unite has held items that you can upgrade that increase your stats. And I know that there are some people... Yeah, there are some people who will argue, oh, well, it doesn't do much. And here's the thing, it shouldn't do anything. It should not make the difference between whether you win in a contest between someone who is evenly matched with you, whether or not you have paid money into the game. And there's some people who go, oh, well, you can just earn it yourself over time. But that's the plausible deniability that they work into these systems. Oh, well, if you play the game for a half a year, eventually you'll be able to upgrade it yourself. Yeah, they know most players aren't going to do that. They know that most players who want to remain competitive are going to pay money into it, because why would you play a game for a half a year when you're not going to be competitive?
Yeah.
And for Turbo Shot, here's the thing. I have not spent a single cent on that game as of this recording, and I do not intend to. And I am winning almost all of my matches. But I still say that game is pay to win, because if I ever encounter in that game another player who is my skill level, who has paid money into the game, they will have an advantage over me. And that's simply not right. That whoever pays the most wins. That's frustrating.
Yeah, I agree.
But it's not just pay to win elements that are, I think, aggressive microtransactions. Honestly, I think any microtransactions in a game that targets children is unacceptable. If it is a game that is meant for children and it's kind of telling them, hey kids, open up into your wallet or your parents' wallet, that's really nasty. If it has multiple different currency types, so it's trying to confuse you so you don't know how much money you need to spend to get the thing you want, that's kind of nasty. If it has loot boxes where you're not even sure what it is you're spending money on, that's kind of nasty. It's like all of these things add up, and both Pokemon Unite and Turbo Shot use all of these things. They do all of it. It's not like they pick any one of these nasty microtransactions. They do all of it. Sorry, I'm getting emotional here.
Just a little bit.
I mean, okay. I know that you're used to your I was about to say overshot or overcooked, and I'm like, that's not right. You're used to your Overwatch, and I know that has microtransactions as well.
As loot boxes.
But it's all cosmetic, at least.
It is. And to be honest, even I have a little bit of problem with it because you also get duplicates.
Yeah, and that's the other thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if a lot of these game companies and their defenders like to compare these to collectible card games like Magic the Gathering or the Pokemon card game and be like, Well, when you buy a Pokemon card pack or a Magic the Gathering card pack, you don't know what you're getting in those. That's like a loot box. Why is that any different? Or you might get duplicates you don't need if you buy that card pack. Why is that any different? And the difference is, in those cases, you are getting a physical product that you can then turn around and sell either to the card shop you bought it from or to another player. And with the digital
Exactly.
purchases, you usually do not have that option. In fact, I strain to think of any major release that has allowed you to sell to other players the contents of the loot box that you don't want.
Yeah. Okay. Enough about this morbid kind of scummy topic. Um, all right. So now we'll talk about the highlights for the games eShopper Reviews covered in the month of January 2022. And as a reminder, these are not necessarily games released in January, but games reviewed in the last month. And we'll start by talking about the best games. The
Yes.
first one is Crumble.
So Crumble came out on the PC, I want to say a year or two ago, and it's kind of a small little indie game. It didn't get too much attention, but man, it really deserves it. This is a platformer style game, a 3D platformer, where you play a little blob creature with a long frog like tongue that can be used like a grappling hook. And it combines this with a really good sense of speed, and you find yourself just speeding through these levels and swinging through them. I played this in the game stream earlier in January, and I gotta say, I really, really hope that the folks who developed the 3D Sonic the Hedgehog games take a very hard look at this, because I feel like this game does some of the things that Sonic has been trying to do for decades, and it does them better. It's got a really magnificent sense of speed. It's just tons of fun to just jam through these levels, and you feel like you're barely in control, but you still have kind of the last ditch effort of grabbing onto something with your tongue if you fall off a platform. And it is so much fun to just speed through these levels, and yeah. I'm sorry, I'm not being very articulate here, but I don't know what else I can say other than hey, it's tons of fun. It
All right.
has performance issues on the Nintendo Switch, but they're not so terrible that it mars the enjoyment of the game. It's still a lot of fun.
All right. So next one is Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic.
This one is obviously a classic. I think that anyone who is even remotely paying attention knows that this one has a huge reputation behind it. And I would say it is a bit dated by today's standards, especially since the developer BioWare has gone on to bigger and better things like the Mass Effect series, which does a lot of the things that this game does and bigger and better. But even being a smaller, kind of more dated, older game, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic is still a very good RPG, and it has aged a bit, but it's still aged relatively well, and the port to Nintendo Switch is a solid port. They did a really good job bringing this game to Switch. So if you have fond memories of the original, or if you never played it and don't mind an RPG being a little dated, I'd say this is very much worth it. And if you're not a huge Star Warsy type of fan and aren't really knowledgeable about, all the story and all of that, this game takes place thousands of years before any of the movies or any of that. So you don't need to really know much about the Star Wars franchise. As long as you have the basic idea of, okay, a Jedi is kind of like a space wizard, and, they use lightsabers, which are laser swords, and stuff like that. It has all kinds of little references that fans of the franchise will get, but mostly it's just a really good kind of science fiction-y with fantasy elements RPG, and I highly recommend it.
Okay. And then the last game that you had listed as the best was Little Bug.
Little Bug is another platformer. This is a 2D platformer, although it uses 3D visuals. And this one is a really great kind of challenging platformer that has you swinging around levels with a really good. So it has a mechanic where you can move a cursor and you can swing to that cursor, and so you kind of need to keep track of two characters at the same time because the cursor is a character too, and both of these characters, both the little girl that you're moving around like a normal platformer character and the cursor, either one of them can run into objects and be killed. So you need to be careful with both of them. And maneuvering both of these in tandem and kind of multitasking is a really fun kind of challenge. It's a fairly short game, but it's well done. It's pretty original. Again, I recommend it.
So I am very surprised that the worst games you had Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Pokemon Shining Pearl double pack, and you gave it a D minus.
So here's the thing. I would not list Pokemon Brilliant Diamond or Pokemon Shining Pearl as one of my worst games for the month of January. I have problems with them. I'm definitely not thrilled with them. They are not my worst games in and of themselves. Having said that, the combo pack of the two of them, I cannot imagine why anyone would want to buy this because it costs a penny more than just buying the game separately, first of all. That right off the bat is like, why? Why would you even? Why? No. Second of all, both of the games are virtually identical. The only thing that's different between them is the different Pokemon creatures that are in each game. And the reason why they even sell two different versions of the same game is so that you can trade them with other players. But if you are getting this game, you're getting both of the games, and you can't really do that unless you have two Nintendo Switches. Especially if you're getting the digital version of the game, in which case they're both tied to one account. Why? No! And this is on top of the fact that Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Pokemon Shining Pearl were huge disappointments. And I'll get into that in a bit, but it's like you're compounding one problem on top of another on top of another, and multiple steps in this process involve the question, why would you do this to yourself? Why are you paying more money for this than you need to? Why are you buying the same game twice? Why are you buying a disappointing game in the first place? And while each of the core games here, Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Pokemon Shining Pearl, are not terrible games. They're enjoyable with caveats, and if you ignore the context of they're just like every other single Pokemon game in the last 2 decades. But putting that aside, they're still enjoyable games, but this bundle of the two of them is just so pointless and such a waste, and I have no problem declaring this my worst game for the month because I cannot fathom anyone having a good reason for buying this game these games in this package.
Okay, so the next worst game is Just in Danger, which you gave a D.
Yeah. Man, I wish I could even remember Just in Danger. It's just so
Oof.
generic.
Well, you have it listed as a simple platformer with sluggish controls.
Yeah. And I mean, I remember it. It's just I don't really have much to say about it. It's just so basic, and even doing basic, it doesn't do basic well. It's such a boring platformer, and to have a delay when you press the jump button in a platformer is, and on the Nintendo Switch no less, the system that has all the Mario games and everything on it. Why would you even waste your time with this? No, please don't. Please do not.
All right, so let's move on to the next one then.
Mm-hmm.
The card battle Eternal Destiny, which obviously from the title you can guess it's a card game.
It is a card game. Yes, it's one of those. It's kind of like, again, we were talking about like Magic the Gathering or the Pokemon card game. It's a collectible card game, but it's not a very good one. It has a terrible localization. It has a horrible tutorial. It looks ugly. Like you need to click on individual cards to see even the most basic of what they do, and you will constantly be doing that while you are attempting to play this game. And there are multiple collectible card games on Nintendo Switch. This one is a paid card game. If you're looking for another good paid collectible card game, I would recommend Shadowverse. That is an excellent card game, and it's very much along the same lines. Or if you don't mind the free to play kind of game with the loot box stuff going on in it, Eternal the card game is really excellent on Nintendo Switch. I don't see a reason to put good money towards a bad card game when you have better options like those.
Okay. The last worst game, which I will probably butcher the name of, Greedroid.
Oh, you pronounced that fine. Yeah, that sounds
Okay,
good.
you gave it a D plus, which is the highest grade in all of the worst
The
games for this
highest of the
month.
worst, the highest of
Yeah,
the
the highest of the
lowest.
worst.
um, Greedroid is a dungeon crawler style game, which means that it's one of those games where while you're moving your character around, every move that you make, the enemies move at the same time. And you're exploring these very simple dungeons. It's it has some interesting concepts going on with it. Like the idea that pretty much every element of the environment can be destroyed or used as a weapon. You can pick up walls and throw them, which is a cool idea. I don't think I've seen something quite like that in a dungeon crawler. But the problem is, it doesn't really do anything with that idea. It's so very simple. And once you wrap your head around the concept of being able to grab anything in the environment and chuck it at an enemy, the challenge just goes straight down to nothing. And there's no real way to upgrade your character beyond just the very simple upgrade their attack power, upgrade their defensive capabilities, upgrade their magic capabilities. You don't get more magic spells or anything beyond just the simple one in the beginning where you can damage anyone in the area around you. And like I said, it has some decent ideas, but after a short while of playing this game, you just kind of ask yourself, why am I doing this? There's nothing interesting going on here. It's just the same thing over and over. And they will keep introducing new enemies, but even then it just there's nothing to entice me to keep playing this.
Okay, so you have one hidden gem for this month, which I'm actually kind of surprised about.
Yeah,
And
I didn't have to well, okay, because half of this month was devoted to the Game Awards stuff. I didn't review as many games
yeah,
this month, but given that some of the games that might have been hidden gems in previous months were my best games this month, Crumble and Little
mm-hmm,
Bug,
mm-hmm,
I
mm-hmm,
really only have one left over that made my hidden gems list.
which is Turbo Shot.
Yeah, as much as I am frustrated with the microtransactions in this game, I cannot deny that it's still a lot of fun to play. And it frustrates me that I have to kind of split my opinion on this like that. But it's a two-stick shooter. It has some really good mechanics where you're basically upgrading via multiple upgrade paths as you go along. And in the multiplayer, which I'd say is probably the main focus of the game, you are constantly scrambling to get as many upgrades as you can and seeing them all combined together to make you this ultra powerful, I'm using two chain guns and they're both splitting and the split is focused on this area, so it's just I'm spraying death in every direction kind of. It's a lot of fun mechanically. I will say the game makes use of bots in its multiplayer, which is frustrating in and of itself because it doesn't even it tries to hide this, but it does it poorly. And it does it poorly because the bots are so obviously bots. They're dumb. They do really stupid stuff. And there's so many ways that I can criticize this game, so many things that it does poorly or just plain wrong. But even so, I can't help but enjoy it. It's still so much fun. So yeah.
I'm so for your noteworthy reviews,
Yes.
it's basically the Pokemon games, which I'm very surprised about. Not so much about Sword and Shield, but about Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl.
Did you want to talk about Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl first?
Oh God, not really. I did not play those games when it originally came out. I at the time took a very long break from Pokemon.
Full disclosure, I didn't play Diamond and Pearl either. I I tend to take this approach to Pokemon, which is I will skip multiple generations. And this kind of helps me to feel like the series actually progresses because okay, so I
Yeah.
jumped I started with Pokemon Red and Blue. And
hmm I
then
did too.
I didn't play the series for a little while, and then I jumped in at Pokemon, what was it, Ruby and Sapphire. And I'm like,
hmm
oh,
hmm
cool. Now it's in color. It's got some new mechanics. You can actually breed your Pokemon. And a lot of these were upgrades that were introduced in, what was it, Silver and Gold. But, I'm getting those new things plus the things that they added in Ruby and Sapphire. Okay. So
Right.
then I skipped a couple more generations, and my next Pokemon game was Pokemon X and Y. And now we got 3D visuals, we got a whole bunch of new mechanics,
You got a
and
new Pokemon type
yeah, multiple new Pokemon types. I believe in the interim they had introduced Fairy type and Steel type.
and ice.
Was Ice not in the original? I thought Ice was in the
Nope.
original.
Ice was not in the original. No.
Oh, okay.
That's why we have Glaceon, you know, one of the
Okay.
Eevee evolutions.
Well, I mean, they had Leafeon later too, and that was, Grass type was in the original
Right.
Pokemon.
I don't think Ice was in the original. I could be wrong, but
I don't know.
yeah.
In any case, so that was a huge leap for me going from Ruby and Sapphire to X and Y. And then I skipped again. I went from there straight to Sword and Shield. And the only reason I went straight to Sword and Shield, to be perfectly honest, was that I wanted to review it. And I got to tell you, the leap from X and Y to Sword and Shield, not nearly as big as the leap from Ruby and Sapphire to X and Y. You
Oh,
know,
no,
the
not at
leap
all.
from okay, the leap from black and white to color, okay, that's decent. The leap from color to 3D, okay, that's decent. The leap from, or actually, that was more than decent. That was pretty impressive for me at the time. I was genuinely impressed at how they got the game to look on the 3DS. However,
hmm
then going from handheld to console in the form of their first major release on a console, I was really left feeling like this does not feel a heck of a lot different than X and Y. Through most of the game, you don't have control over the camera. You get control over the camera in the wild area where you can quote unquote freely move about, but even the wild area feels like it's got these paths to follow. And
Uh, as usual.
And yeah, that's not very different for the Pokemon series. It's nice that you can see Pokemon moving around in the wild, but not all of the Pokemon move around in the wild. Some of them are still kind of like shaking leaves in the grass or whatever, and you have a mystery of, well, what is this before you go and you fight it. It's still a progression of the formula, but it's not much of a progression, especially considering the leap in platforms really should have made for more of a jump from the Nintendo 3DS to the Nintendo Switch. And not only is it not much of a jump, but they actually removed features from Pokemon Sword and Shield. The big one, of course, is the loss of the regional, or sorry, the national decks, where
hmm
for the first time in the history of the mainline Pokemon games, no longer can you now catch them all. Now, there's only a portion of the entirety of the Pokemon included in the game. And that also means that now that Pikachu that's been your bestest bud that's stuck with you through multiple iterations of the franchise, well, now he can't go with you on this new adventure. If you want a Pikachu in this game, you got to catch a new one. Say
Oh,
bye-bye to your old favorite Pokemon. He's no longer with you. And just that they could make that kind of severe cut to the franchise in a game that is already disappointing. uh, I'm yeah, Pokemon Sword and Shield is a huge disappointment, and it's still a fun game. It still has that great core Pokemon formula that has been great for decades now. But the problem is it's that same core Pokemon formula that we've been doing for decades now. And if you own any of the prior Pokemon games, I almost kind of feel like it doesn't feel like there's as much a point to get Sword and Shield because it doesn't really do much that's new. I mean, one of the big new features here is the whole Gigantamax or the Gigamax thing where you
I
fight,
am not impressed with that
yeah, you fight a super
whatsoever.
huge Pokemon, which is like they basically took the character model and increased the size of it and called it a day. And that's
Hmm.
just dumb. As opposed
I
to
would
in
have,
X and Y when you had the Mega Evolutions where they
which
actually
were
had a
awesome.
cool new character model for like your Charizard like grows extra features and stuff, and hey, that's awesome. Why did they give a downgraded version of that same idea for this game? And I will say,
Exactly.
mechanic, mechanically, it works a bit different, but it's still the same kind of basic idea. And so that was disappointing. And then look over at Pokemon Shining Pearl and Brilliant Diamond, and that's a whole new level of disappointing because now it's basically like they looked at people who said, that was the most disappointing Pokemon game I've had in a while. And Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl said, hold my beer. And so now they're like, okay, you were expecting
Jeez.
something with the Pokemon Diamond and Pearl story and that generation, but using the Pokemon Sword and Shield gameplay and visuals, kind of like they've done with previous generations, like they did with, in every generation they will have a kind of retro generation where they'll bring back a previous generation of Pokemon games using the modern generation graphics and all of that kind of stuff. Yeah, they didn't do that this time. This time they had a remake where it's kind of like a little bit like what they did with Link's Awakening, where it's kind of like they used very simple 3D graphics to remake Diamond and Pearl, but definitely nothing impressive. They didn't really modernize the mechanics. In fact, it's still tile based. If you want to move, your character is moving around wherever you move them, but all of the other characters in the game, like they'll shift over one tile at a time. It looks really strange. And that they didn't even bother to try and modernize this game in any significant way. It's like they saw how disappointed people were with Sword and Shield, and they were like, you know what, let's make this one even more disappointing. Let's see if they still buy it. And sure enough, they did. It absolutely sold well.
Yeah,
And it's
it did.
really depressing to see how little effort they can put into a Pokemon game and still have it sell well.
Okay, let's talk about Nintendo Switch Online Expansion Pack,
Yes.
which for January 2022, it's Banjo-Kazooie.
Yes, they had yet another drip, drip, drip of release for the Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack. This time we got Banjo-Kazooie, which, to its credit, is a wonderful game. I would argue it is one of the best games on the Nintendo 64 app at this point. In fact, it is one of the best games for the expansion pack in general. It's aged somewhat, of course. It was a Nintendo 64 game, so naturally. But I think that this game benefits from some degree of modernization that the game received when Rare did their remaster of the game on the Xbox. I think it was the Xbox 360. And I feel like some of that has carried over here. This does not look like a straight port of the Nintendo 64 game. The resolution is higher. It still has some low-res textures, but some of the textures look nicer. It's still got some mechanical issues that are held over from the Nintendo 64 because that was a system that only had one analog stick, so moving the camera around is really awkward in this game. But even with some of those clunky mechanical issues, this is still an excellent 3D platformer, and I would actually argue it has aged better than Super Mario 64 has, which might be sacrilege to say. I know that Super Mario 64 is extremely historically important. It still had magnificent level design. It's still one of my favorite games of all time, but it's also kind of hard to ignore how poorly that game has aged. And Banjo-Kazooie has aged a bit more gracefully, I would argue. It's still also disappointing that this is the only game that the pack has gotten, at least as of this recording. I don't know if they're going to shadow drop some Sega Genesis games kind of like they did in December, but at least at the moment, this is all we got for the month of January, and it's frustrating that this is Nintendo's approach to the Nintendo Switch Online service. Is just, we're going to leave it a mystery what you're going to get, and usually when you get it, you're not going to get much.
Yikes. All right, so now is when we normally answer patron-submitted questions. As a reminder, Patreon donors who contribute any amount can have their questions discussed on the podcast. However, this month we don't have any patron questions, so I have prepared a question of my own to ask Jake.
Okay. Go
If
ahead.
you could
sorry.
live... Oh, no.
Start over again.
I'm trying to think about how to word this question.
Okay.
If you could live in any video game world, what would it be?
Oh my.
It's hard, right?
Well, the funny thing is there are some worlds that are really super fun and awesome, but at the same time, it's like, would you really want to live in that world? That seems like that would be dangerous, or
right.
Like, okay, two of the ones that immediately come to mind are Pokemon and Animal Crossing.
I knew you were going to say those two.
Really? Okay.
Yes.
Why do you think I was going to say those two?
Because it's tranquil, yet there's a little sense of adventure in there. It's not too dangerous, and there's just that sense of childish carefreeness. It's just a carefree world in a sense.
I will say, being family-friendly games, that the lack of any overt indication of adult activities, let's just say,
or adulthood
in these games is a bit of it gives a bit of pause, because I happen to enjoy some of those activities. But looking at, yes, you're right, the lack of danger is definitely a perk. Not having to worry about something coming along and killing me. Granted, Pokemon, theoretically, that could happen, but usually Pokemon games tend to be a bit more along the lines of, nobody dies, they faint. Oh, you didn't get killed, you just fainted and needed to be brought back for medical attention. And it's like, okay, I could deal with fainting, I guess. I'm not sure if that's just... I will
say that there's death in Pokemon.
There is, yes. But it's fairly rare, at least as far as when they talk about it. Although I do believe in some of the games, don't they talk about like wars that happened in the past or something?
They do. But this was in the earlier games that they would talk about wars. I don't remember the like more modern ones talking about it anymore.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I recall something like that. But just in general, they're fairly lighthearted. There's a lot of freedom to go around and do what you want. I will say I might feel kind of icky about, in Pokemon, the food items that are available to you are usually various types of cooked Pokemon. And that seems
Mm,
really iffy when you're talking about Pokemon are clearly depicted as having some form of sentience or sapience. And
yeah.
while I understand that you gotta eat, um, I
I wouldn't
would,
mind eating a Magikarp.
I would
I'd be
still,
fine eating a Magikarp.
I would still feel weird about my existence, my subsistence being predicated on the deaths of sentient sapient animals. And like there are not any non-Pokemon animals in that world as far as I'm aware. I don't recall seeing just birds flying around or just bugs flying around. It's usually
Yep.
bird Pokemon and bug Pokemon.
Yep.
Um, on the other side, probably my number one pick as far as a world that I would actually want to live in, probably Animal Crossing, because that one doesn't have the kind of iffy question of eating sentient sapient animals. Although there is the question of why are these animals okay and these animals not?
Oh God. um, I don't know.
Yeah, but okay, so let's just say they're different species entirely. The actual sentient sapient animals are the anthropomorphic ones in Animal Crossing. Okay, fine. I can live with that, I guess. That's weird, but okay. I'm just eating your distant, not as evolved cousin, I guess. um, but
Okay. Okay.
but the idea of, hey, I'm free to just casually live my life how I want. I don't need to worry about necessarily holding down a job. Any debts that I have can be paid at my own leisure. There's no such thing as interest. I
Mm-hmm.
can, in the meantime, I can collect a house full of all kinds of fun, whatever trinkets, or, I can get 15 Nintendo Switches if I want. Hey, it sounds great to me. Um, yeah, I'm not seeing much of a downside there. My character doesn't even age. How about that? Um, I don't know. What about you? What game would you want to be trapped in for all eternity if you had to live in a game?
Probably Pokemon, if I'm honest.
Okay.
Um, I am an animal person, and Pokemon are very close to animals. Um, Maybe Digimon too?
Okay. I've
Maybe.
only
Not
played
sure.
the only Digimon game I played was the one that was released on Switch, the what was
Cyber Sleuth,
yes, Digimon
right?
Cyber Sleuth. And that
Yeah.
one was excellent, but I wonder because I'm not as familiar with that series. Are the previous Digimon games are they set in that same world?
So I don't think there are a ton of Digimon games. But the one in Cyber Sleuth is a more modern
Is that the one you
telling.
were thinking of then when you said that that would be one you'd want to live in?
Probably that one. Yeah.
Okay. I can see that.
Um,
It's kind of like a normal, just regular world, but with being able to jump into this like virtual reality kind of thing where there are
and then
these.
have companions. I don't
Yes.
know. I am an animal person. I enjoy their company. So of course I would choose Pokemon and Digimon. But definitely more Pokemon, I think.
Well, with VR technology picking up steam, I suppose it's entirely possible that we might end up finding ourselves in a version of that world. I mean, I can see someone
Yep.
releasing a Pokemon or Digimon style game where when you jump into the game, you're jumping into a cyberspace with little, animal friends. So you kind of already there, Jen.
Yeah. 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 And then I will just lose myself there forever.
All right.
Anyway, that wraps things up for this month's eShopperReviews podcast. Again, we want to thank all of our patrons on Patreon for contributing. Patreon donors are the first ones to gain access to these podcasts. And if you're interested in becoming a donor, please check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/eShopperReviews. And once again, if you're curious to read any of the reviews or content mentioned in this podcast, you can find it on the eShopperReviews subreddit at reddit.com/r/eShopperReviews. Once again, this has been Jen Ip
and Jake McNeil.
We'll see you next month, and in the meantime, we both hope you found this content helpful and enjoyed some good games. Catch you all next time.
Later.